My boss's wife openly humiliated me at my divorce, saying, maybe try being less intimidating next time. Then her husband texted me, leaving her, want to grab dinner, she saw it. She turned pale. My husband, 45 male, cheated on me with my boss's wife's niece. At our divorce hearing, my boss's wife openly humiliated me, implying I was the reason I got cheated on for being too intimidating. A few weeks later, my boss, her husband, sent me a message saying he was divorcing her and asked me to dinner. She saw the text. The look on her face was its own form of justice. Maybe try being less intimidating next time. That was the line. The exact sentence Verena, my boss's wife, whispered to me outside a Denver courtroom, right after I'd signed away a 17-year marriage that I thought was solid until it crumbled like dust. She said it with the kind of smug calm only a woman dripping in money and casual cruelty can deliver. Verena had always had that polished kind of venom, like she knew how to kill you slowly, with a smile. At that moment, I didn't know what stunned me more, her words, or the fact that she had the nerve to say them. What I also didn't know then was that her husband, my boss, was standing just a few feet away, and he heard everything. My name is Celine, and I'm 43. I've lived in Denver most of my adult life. I work in private equity, financial analysis, and investment management. It's not glamorous, but it's good work, and I'm good at it. I met my now ex-husband Marcus when I was 19 and working part-time at a bookstore. He was 21, studying business, and he came in looking for a book on negotiation. I suggested getting to yes. We went for coffee later that day. One thing led to another. We got married when I was 26, bought a fixer-upper, spent weekends tearing out drywall, drinking cheap wine, laughing about nothing. We were solid, or so I thought. No kids by choice at first, and then not by choice. That's another story. Suffice it to say, after a few deeply painful losses, I closed that door. So did Marcus, or I thought he had. He changed around the time I turned 40. It started with him being quieter, more distant, more concerned with his appearance, new gym membership, new cologne, shirts I'd never seen. He started doing Pilates, which struck me as funny at first. Pilates Marcus became a running joke in my head. Then I saw the texts, late-night messages with someone named Maura, and a necklace in the glove compartment, not mine. When I confronted him, he flipped it around, said I was suspicious and intense, that I made him feel small. Maybe I should try being less intimidating. That phrase again. I found out later Maura was a 27-year-old yoga instructor from Boulder. I also found out she was Verena's niece. I never met her before all this, and suddenly she was the other woman in my marriage. It made sense, in a way. She was the complete opposite of me. Ethereal, soft-spoken, never wore heels. I filed for divorce a month later. The courtroom hearing was brutal, though straightforward. No kids, no battle over custody. Just money, the house, the usual. I had the stronger case, legally speaking. Marcus tried to argue that I'd been emotionally abusive because I made more than him, that I emasculated him by refusing to tone down my career goals. The judge didn't buy it, neither did anyone else in the room, but the moment that stuck with me came after the session, when we were gathering our things and heading out. That's when I saw her. Verena. She walked right up to me in the hallway like she'd been waiting for it. We'd only met briefly before, at work events, charity things. She always had a way of making you feel like you'd underdressed, even when you hadn't. On that day, she was in a fitted white coat and Louboutin heels. I still remember the sharp scent of her perfume, jasmine and judgment. "Celine," she said, "tough day." I nodded, trying to walk past her. That's when she leaned in, close enough that I could feel the edge in her voice. "Maybe next time," she whispered, "try being less intimidating." And she smiled. I didn't respond. Couldn't, my mouth went dry. All I could think was, what kind of woman sides with her niece after that niece sleeps with a married man? I found out later that she was deeply involved in Maura's life. She treated her like the daughter she never had. Marcus became a convenient pawn in some toxic family fantasy she was playing out. 3 weeks passed. I returned to work. Dorian, my boss and Verena's husband, was surprisingly supportive. We weren't close before all this, but he gave me space. Keep things professional. Then one Friday evening, as I stayed late finalizing a presentation, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Dorian. "Saw Verena's little performance at your hearing. I was appalled. Just so you know, I'm filing for divorce next week. Also, want to grab dinner? It was so unexpected I laughed. Then another message came right after. She saw me type this. She turned pale, it was beautiful. I froze, looked at the screen, I could picture it. Verena standing behind him, reading over his shoulder. The color drained from her perfectly contoured face. I didn't respond that night. But I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not vindication, not attraction, something deeper, relief. Someone had finally seen me. I did go to dinner with Dorian, not immediately. A week later, we talked. It wasn't romantic. It was just two people who had lived through the same hurricane and washed up on the same beach. He told me his marriage had been dead for years. Verena was obsessed with appearances, with control, with preserving a life that was hollow. That Mora's involvement in my marriage had been an embarrassment he couldn't apologize for enough. I didn't ask him to. Over the next few months, we became friends, confidants. It was strange, this man who had always seemed so above the fray became a source of peace. And Verena, she spiraled. The story goes she tried to get Dorian back, showed up at his office, sent dramatic emails, invited him to therapy weekends. He didn't bite. When she learned he'd filed for divorce, she allegedly screamed in the lobby of their building. Security had to escort her out. It made the rounds among the employees. No one dared to laugh, but people whispered. There's more. A lot more. But I'll stop here for now. Let me know if anyone wants the rest of how Marcus tried to crawl back, how Verena tried to sabotage me at work, and what actually happened the night Dorian and I went to dinner. Let's just say, what started with humiliation ended with clarity, and a surprising kind of freedom. I didn't expect the second dinner with Dorian to happen, let alone the third. The first was polite, even therapeutic in a strange way, two people unraveling pieces of themselves that had been carefully coiled for years. We talked about everything except Verena and Marcus. It wasn't avoidance. It was more like we were each quietly grateful to be sitting across from someone who didn't need to be explained to. By the third dinner, we were laughing. And that was the moment I realized how long it had been since I laughed without feeling self-conscious or guilty or like I was managing someone else's discomfort. Marcus hadn't made me laugh in years. Not really. And when he did, it always came with an asterisk, something said at my expense, something meant to remind me not to get too serious. Dorian was different. Not in a Prince Charming way. He had his baggage just like I had mine, but he was self-aware, grounded, and more importantly, he listened. No fixing, no deflecting, just listening. Still, I was cautious. I wasn't ready to let a man become a central theme in my life again. So I set boundaries, clear ones. We didn't talk outside of work during the week unless it was necessary. No office gossip, no physical anything. I wasn't falling for my boss. I was rediscovering myself around someone who saw me clearly. That was it. But of course, nothing is that simple. A few weeks later, I started noticing weird behavior from a couple people at the office. Nothing overt, just glances, side comments, whispers that quieted when I walked into a room. I brushed it off at first. Office dynamics had always had an undercurrent of gossip, especially in finance. People were bored. They speculated. Then it got worse. I walked into a meeting with one of our newer associates, Petra, and caught her mid-conversation with one of the interns. "She's got him on a leash," Petra said. "It's obvious." They both froze when they saw me. Petra muttered something about the coffee machine. The intern scurried out like a kid caught stealing. I didn't say anything. I just sat down, opened my laptop, and started the meeting like nothing happened. But it stuck with me. That night, I got a text from Dorian. "Verena's stirring the pot." I called him immediately. Apparently, after Dorian filed the papers, Verena went on a quiet warpath. She couldn't hurt him directly. He was too respected, too insulated in the firm. But she could spread whispers. And she did. She started attending social events again, charity galas, investment dinners. She told anyone who'd listen that I had seduced her husband, that I had positioned myself to climb the corporate ladder, that I was leveraging a personal relationship for professional gain. The insinuation stung more than anything else. It wasn't just about me and Dorian. It was about undermining my work, my credibility. Everything I'd built over the past 15 years. She wasn't just attacking my character, she was trying to erase it. I requested a meeting with HR. I didn't come in guns blazing. That's never been my way. But I laid it out clearly, factually, and with timestamps. I showed them how my reviews over the years had always been strong, how I had exceeded every target, how I had never once received disciplinary action or complaints. I explained the situation without going into unnecessary detail. I made it clear I wasn't looking for favoritism. I was looking for fairness. HR was receptive, at least on paper. They said the right things. Promised monitoring, reminded me about company culture and internal equity. But I could tell they were walking a line. Verena still had connections, old money, old networks, and Dorian, he was furious when he found out. Not performatively so, quietly, thoughtfully, like someone who had finally realized what his wife had been capable of all these years. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he told me one night, after a late dinner at a place near Capitol Hill. "You're not the one who should be under scrutiny." I believed him. But belief doesn't stop damage. The real shift came not long after that. At the annual investor retreat, a 2-day event at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. It was always a big deal. Investors, partners, board members. Everyone who mattered in our ecosystem was there. I hadn't planned to go. I'd skipped it the year before due to the divorce chaos. But this year, Dorian asked me specifically. "You should be seen," he said. "On your terms." So I went. And wouldn't you know it, Verena was there. Even after the divorce filing, she still showed up, draped in silk, with a drink in her hand and an entourage of socialites circling like perfume-scented vultures. She didn't come near me until the second night. After dinner, when most people were making small talk near the fire pit, she found her moment. She stepped in front of me as I was getting a drink. "I hear congratulations are in order," she said, smiling too wide. "Making a partner so quickly, it must be nice to have powerful friends." I didn't rise to it. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Must be hard watching someone do the work you thought the right last name could shortcut." She blinked, just once, then turned and walked away. Dorian saw the whole thing. He didn't say anything then. But later, when we sat alone on a quiet balcony, he handed me a glass of wine and said, That was better than anything I could have said in a boardroom." The fallout from that weekend was subtle but seismic. The partners saw me in a different light, not as Dorian's project, but as someone who could handle herself, who knew how to stand her ground. The internal gossip slowed. The whispers stopped carrying weight. And Verena. She didn't show up to the next company event. Or the one after that. I don't know what corner she retreated to, but it wasn't mine anymore. And Marcus? Oh, Marcus. He came crawling back in the most predictable, disappointing way. One night I got an email, just a subject line, "Thinking of you." Inside, a 5-paragraph apology, a mix of self-pity and vague regret. I didn't know what I had. "Maura and I are done. I was stupid, and the worst of all. Can we just get a coffee? No pressure." I didn't respond. But I'll admit, I read it more than once. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I needed to remember who I used to be. The version of me that would have said yes. That would have been hoped. She's gone now. And thank God for that. I never replied to Marcus's email. It sat in my inbox like a time capsule, a reminder of who I used to be and how far I'd come. I left it unread, not because I was ignoring it, but because I didn't want to give it the closure it didn't deserve. A few weeks later, I ran into him in the most mundane way possible, at a Whole Foods near Cherry Creek, standing by the produce section, squinting at a mango like it held the answers to his life. He looked older, not in a physical way, but in the sagging posture of someone who'd been trying to rebuild something and failed. He wore a zip-up fleece and jeans that hung awkwardly on him. The confident, charming version of Marcus was gone, replaced by someone uncertain of his place in the world. He saw me before I saw him. "Selling," he said, almost apologetically. I paused, gave him a tight smile. "Marcus," there was a beat of awkward silence. He gestured to the mango. "Do you know how to pick a ripe one?" I shrugged. "Squeeze it gently. If it gives a little, it's ready, just like people." He laughed, but I didn't. He stood there a moment longer, like he wanted to say more. But I turned away and walked to the self-checkout. I didn't need to finish that conversation. He already knew. That was my closure. Meanwhile, things at work had settled. The whispers were gone. My performance was speaking louder than anything Verena could say, and the truth about how things had unfolded was slowly taking shape across our firm. Turns out, people are smarter than we give them credit for. They might believe gossip for a moment, but over time, consistent actions and integrity win out. Dorian and I maintained our boundaries at work, but after hours, we let things evolve. There was no grand love story, not in the traditional sense. Just mutual respect, patience, and something that felt a lot like home. We didn't talk much about Verena, not because we were afraid to, but because she simply became irrelevant. That changed one afternoon when Dorian walked into my office with a folder in his hand and a grin that made him look 10 years younger. "Remember that investment seminar we're hosting next quarter?" he asked. "The one at the Four Seasons?" "Yeah, guess who just applied to host a panel under her new consulting agency?" I tilted my head. "She wouldn't." "She did." He handed me the folder. Inside was a proposal from a newly registered brand consulting firm, Clarion and Vale, based out of Scottsdale. Verena was listed as founder and lead strategist. The pitch was solid, but not spectacular. Lots of buzzwords. No real substance. He waited for my reaction. I leaned back in my chair. "She wants back in." "She does." I glanced at him. "So what do we do?" Dorian smiled slowly. "We let you decide." The power in that moment wasn't about rejecting her. It was about the fact that I could have. I read through her proposal 3 times, made notes, highlighted where she'd oversold, where she'd underestimated her audience, where she recycled slides from an old pitch deck that was publicly available online. Then I drafted the response. "Dear Miss Vale, thank you for your submission to the Denver Investor Relations Summit. We appreciate your interest in contributing to this year's program. After careful review, we have decided not to move forward with your proposal at this time. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Celine Drayton, Director of Strategic Partnerships, Ulrich Capital." I sent it from my direct email. I didn't delegate it to an assistant. I wanted her to see my name, my title, my signature. Dorian didn't ask for a copy. He didn't need to. The next week, I received a notification that Clarion and Vale had quietly removed Verena's name from their website. Within a month, the firm's site was taken down entirely. That was my revenge, not the dramatic, scorched earth kind, but the quiet kind, the one that doesn't scream, it whispers, it lets time and truth do their work. As for me, I kept doing what I was doing. I kept showing up, kept delivering results, and kept mentoring the younger women in our firm. I started a monthly networking dinner just for women in finance, something I wish I'd had earlier in my career. We talked about negotiation, confidence, imposter syndrome. We talked about ambition without shame. We built something real. Dorian eventually finalized his divorce. It was clean. He was generous, fair, no spectacle. No public fallout, and us, we stayed steady, never rushed, never defined by what had happened around us. He once said to me, "I didn't find you because of her, I found myself when I met you." That stuck with me. It's funny. People expect revenge to be loud, explosive, dramatic. But sometimes the most satisfying revenge is being exactly who they tried to convince the world you weren't. Capable, respected, unshaken, and thriving. Verena wanted to humiliate me. She wanted me to shrink, disappear. Instead, I became undeniable. That's the ending she never saw coming, and that's the one I got to live.